Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Friends of Intelligent Democracy candidate Q&A series. Tonight, I am joined by Kara Eastman, the Democratic nominee for Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, which we're going to flip blue this year. Before I turn it over to Kara, I'm just going to introduce her to everyone watching on the stream tonight. She has a master's in social work and started Omaha Healthy Kids Alliance and grew it from a small startup, lead poisoning prevention organization to a nationally recognized award-winning nonprofit that has raised more than $13 million to support green, safe, and healthy housing in Omaha. Under Eastman's leadership, OCA has directly served over 4,000 Nebraska families. In this process, she has created dozens of jobs at her nonprofit, within the city government, and through partnerships with the small businesses and contractors she worked with. She has been a board member of the Nonprofit Association of the Midlands and has served as an appointed member of the Mayor of Omaha's Fair Housing Advisory Board. Eastman is a lifelong Democrat, and in 2014, she overwhelmingly won election to the Board of Governors of Metropolitan Community College in Omaha, one of the top 10 community colleges in the country. Elected as vice chair of the board, she strengthened non-discrimination policies, developed contractor training programs that created jobs in that community, and led the initiative to ban tobacco usage on all MCC campuses. In 2018, she won the Democratic nomination for Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District and came within 1.9% of unseating the incumbent Republican. Eastman won the 2020 Democratic primary by 20,000 votes and is currently set to face off against Don Bacon once more in November 2020. Eastman and her husband, Scott, an associate professor of history at Creighton University, live in Omaha, while their daughter, Sabina, has just started college at Kara's alma mater. In her free time, Eastman is on the hunt to find the best chicken wings in Nebraska. So I'll now turn it over to you, Kara.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. And well, you just got to hear a lot about me. And I'm really honored to be doing this. It seems like a long time to be running for Congress, but given the state of our country, given the fact that Donald Trump continues to be the president of the United States, this election is so critically important for a number of reasons, not just for saving democracy, protecting rights of so many people who don't have a voice already, but also this particular race is really critical because not only can we elect the first woman to serve the district, but we have the ability. So in Nebraska, we split our electoral college votes. And in 2008, we gave one to Obama, and we have the ability to do that again this year with Biden and Harris. And Biden is currently up in the polls. So it looks like a very promising district. That makes the race even more exciting. And we're really happy with the momentum that is happening right now that we're seeing on the ground. It's a hard time to campaign in the middle of COVID. It's a hard time probably to do anything in the middle of COVID, but I have an amazing team who really reconfigured as quickly as possible once the pandemic hit Nebraska. And so we've just been doing a lot of phone banking, a lot of outreach to people, doing a lot of stuff digitally. We're up on TV, and it's going well. I'm ahead in the polls. The district's been upgraded to toss-up from lean Republican, and we're just going to keep going to the end because there's no way I'm going to do this twice and lose. We just have to win this time.
Great. So we have a copy of your newest ad called Bacon, and we are going to play it for the stream tonight. And so here we go with that.
Mom, is breakfast ready?
I like bacon. Who doesn't? But we all know too much bacon is bad for your health.
Mom.
Don Bacon bragged about voting to dismantle our healthcare system and protections for pre-existing conditions. He took money from the drug industry and voted to give them a massive tax break. I'm Kara Eastman, and I approve this message because I'll protect Nebraskans' healthcare. But first, let's cut back on the bacon.
It's burnt again.
All right, one of definitely my favorite ads that I've seen this cycle. And now we're going to get started with some questions. So first, as you said, COVID-19 is something that's on everyone's mind, has rocked this country. And, we have new allegations coming to light against the president about covering up the extent to which the pandemic was going to hit the United States. And part of this conversation has been on mask wearing. And so my first question is, do you think that wearing a mask has become a political statement? And what are the dangers of politicizing public health like this?
It absolutely has become a political statement, and it's hard to fathom why. Although when you have someone at the highest level of leadership in the country who is making it that way, that further creates that divide. We've been able to overcome things like this in the past, but this one's really hard given the number of fatalities and the number of casualties from the pandemic. And it's one of those things where I talk to people in the district who tell me they don't think wearing a mask is important, that the science is out and all these things, but we have the science and we need to actually bring back science and get people to believe in science again, because let's say there's still a possibility of transmitting the virus with a mask on. Like, it's the best option we have to keeping it at bay. We know this from science. Public health experts around the country, and in particular in Nebraska, we have amazing expertise in pandemic response right here at Nebraska Medicine. And it's just unfathomable that our leadership, from the highest level of leadership in the country to our governor, to our mayor, just have not embraced this. I feel very fortunate that Omaha City Council did pass a mask mandate a few weeks ago. So, unfortunately a little too late, but it's just, we have got to flip this president, because people's lives are at stake. I mean, I have friends who have family members died of COVID. I know so many people who have gotten it, who've been really sick. And I'm also worried where the Republican Party seems to want to strip away protections for pre-existing conditions. COVID would be a pre-existing condition. Like, there's so much of a mess to clean up right now. And I think that that's really going to be priority for anybody in Congress.
Great. And then along the same line, and you kind of touched on this again, with COVID, we've seen a lot of people struggle with dealing with the American healthcare system. There are stories where hospitals turn people away. There hasn't been enough PPE to go around. What do you believe is the biggest reform we can make to our healthcare system, dealing with affordability and other issues?
So I, like the majority of Americans, believe in expanding healthcare, that healthcare is a right. And one of the things that we've seen in the midst of the pandemic is that more and more people are starting to understand how dangerous it can be, or precarious it can be, to have healthcare coupled with employment. When so many people, so many Nebraskans have lost their job, therefore losing their healthcare. And I believe in a system where people are not drowning in debt because of their prescriptions. And actually recently, my opponent voted, and now you know his name because of the commercial, Bacon voted against expanding the Affordable Care Act in the middle of a pandemic. That meant voting against lowering prescription drugs. That meant lowering or protecting pre-existing conditions. Unbelievable. And he's notorious for voting not just yes, but hell yes to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I would have voted to expand it. So while I believe that we need to get to a system where we have universal health care, I personally like Pramila Jayapal's bill, HR 1384, the Medicare for All Act, because it's been proven that it would save the federal government money, about $2 trillion over a decade, and that's at the low end of savings when we're spending 18% of GDP on healthcare. Before the pandemic, we were projected that we would be spending 24% of GDP on healthcare over the next decade. That is an outrageous amount of money considering our outcomes being so poor. So I want to go to Congress to work on healthcare. I'm running because my mother was prescribed a $2,500 pill that she couldn't afford. And in telling that story on the campaign trail, people from all over the country, all over the district, tell me they're experiencing similar things. I met a family the other day who said they're spending $11,000 a month on their child's medication, $11,000 a month. And we know that people can go to other countries and get drugs a lot cheaper. And we know that basically people like my opponent are funded by pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, and then they vote the way those groups want them to. I don't take corporate PAC money in my campaign because I believe that politicians need to stand for people over corporate profits.
Exactly. And, It's actually, the more and more we have these events, you're the third candidate that we've had that has talked about their motivation for running being related to our broken healthcare system. And I think that's something consistent across many candidates running this cycle. And, as you talked about Congresswoman Jayapal's bill, when we talk about healthcare, that's a bill that would save money. And Republicans are always about reducing the deficit and reducing government spending. And yet when presented with an option to save trillions of dollars, all of a sudden they no longer care about that issue, which is just dumbfounding to me. My next question changes topics a little bit to climate change. Gen Z and younger millennials like me and my team have been leading the fight for climate justice and against a climate crisis that we were born into. How do you plan on supporting their message and actions as a member of Congress?
Well, this is an issue that is incredibly important to me for a number of reasons. I ran a children's environmental health organization for 12 years. And our focus was investing in green, safe, healthy housing. So, and the reason for that is that we can see this triple net benefit of, creating a vibrant green economy, creating a green workforce, all locally. Those are all local jobs, right? That's stuff that you'd be doing locally. You could have window manufacturers produce locally. This is all local stuff. Great unionized jobs, great paying jobs, while also impacting climate change by improving energy efficiency in housing. And what that does is lower utility bills, especially for low-income families. And we know that people living in poverty pay a significantly higher proportion of their income on their utility bills than everybody else. It also makes the home safer, healthier, keeps kids from getting poisoned by lead, which is it's the number one environmental hazard to kids. And so for me, this is where we create buy-in, because I think sometimes when we talk about climate change, it sounds like to a lot of people, it sounds like this doesn't impact us. Although, let's be honest, right? Let's look at what's happening in California right now with fires. Let's look at what's happening with hurricanes on the East Coast. And in Nebraska, our farming community has been decimated by flooding. So there's so many ways that this impacts all of us. It impacts our agricultural economy. It impacts our access to fresh food and water. It clearly impacts our ability to breathe clean air. And we can't afford for politicians to come around on this issue. My opponent has publicly stated that he doesn't think that climate change is all person made. And he kind of talks about this in this weird way of denying science, but also, pushing that Democrats want austerity. We don't. We want prosperity. And there's a way to do this in a place like Nebraska, where we have such abundant resources in wind and solar, and we could be leaders there. We could be leaders in investments in renewables. Nebraska, of all places, this prairie state, is a place where we have so many people that are worried about the planet. And so there can be that combination of creating a green economy in conjunction with actual movement on climate change. And like I said, we just don't have time to wait.
No, especially as someone who's thinking about their kids and grandkids, definitely no time to wait, no time like the present, as they say. My next question kind of relates to that jobs component you were talking about. In your opinion, what is the best way we can improve work standards and wage protections for low income or minimum wage workers in America?
Well, this question is even more poignant now, given the fact that so many people have lost their jobs. And my priority, there are things that I want to go to Congress to do. I want to work on healthcare. I want to get money out of politics. I want to work on climate change. But for anybody going to Congress in January, the priority is going to have to be getting people back to work safely, because people can't afford to not be working. I talked to a couple the other day who said that they both lost their job, and now they're having to decide who's going to go back to work because the kids are home. And given the way that the president has botched this whole thing, knowingly botched this whole thing, I don't know what comes next. And especially if we don't all go out and vote him out. So we're going to have a plan, and anybody running for Congress, anybody running for president is going to have a plan. And I'm confident that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would be able to handle this so much better. But I am in favor of a livable wage, which actually sounds so it sounds like a very low bar these days, because I know too many people who are working 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table. I'm a social worker. I've worked in nonprofit for over 20 years. I feel very fortunate that my life view, my worldview is formed by the clients that I've served. And I'm tired of watching single moms in our district have to work so much just to make sure that their kids have the things that they need to just be able to go to school, just be able to, have clothing and school supplies and the things that they need. That's the very bare minimum. It used to be that, my grandfather taught me, like, in the United States, you work hard, you get ahead. And that's not actually the case for the vast majority of Americans anymore, who are struggling to find good paying jobs, who are struggling to find, have access to public transportation, struggling even to have access to healthy, nutritious food. And I live in the eastern core of our city, which is a food desert. And there are a number of people, and we know this with, kids not going to school, they're missing out on food as a result as well. So I do believe that we need to raise the federal minimum wage. I always hear from people like, oh, businesses can't afford it. I ran a small nonprofit business. We always pay people at least $15 an hour. If I could raise the money to do that there, that's not always the easiest thing to do as a nonprofit leader. People don't necessarily want to pay for that. They want to pay for your services. But I was able to make the case that that was the right thing to do. And I think we need to do that for American prosperity. I'm also very pro-union. I've been endorsed by a number of unions locally in the district. And it's funny because we're seeing this shift politically where a lot of more union members and a lot of unions are supporting Republicans. And yet my opponent has voted to dismantle unions. He's for right to work, which is a misnomer, right? It's actually against unions. He voted against the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organizing Act.
Yeah.
And the Republican Party is pretty out and proud about their desire to fundamentally dismantle unions. And so it's hard to understand why they would support them.
Exactly. And the same, as you were talking about corporate PACs earlier, the same corporate PACs that are supporting Republicans are like Walmart and Amazon, who are trying to union bust all over the place, which truly to me is one of the most un-American things possible. My next question switches topics to immigration. Immigrants are an integral part of this country and deserve the same protections and rights that all Americans deserve. What will you do to make sure that our most vulnerable populations are protected from harmful legislation and policing that we've seen in the Trump administration?
So this issue is also personal to me for a number of reasons. My field director for my campaign is a dreamer, and she is one of the bravest people that I know. She went before the Supreme Court to testify. She's shared her story with a number of journalists and with people around the district and around the country. And she's a remarkable person. She is fighting right now for a country, right? To change to protect democracy, to fight for somebody like me to get elected who she believes in. And this is a country that doesn't let her vote. And I think that that's a really powerful statement, that somebody would dedicate their life. I mean, it's hard to be a field director for a campaign right now. And she's remarkable, but she's also lives in fear in a number of ways. I don't think she would frame it that way because she's too strong and too brave. But I know that it's scary. It's scary for her family to think that at any point she might not be able to live here anymore. This is the country she knows and loves. She's more American than anybody I know. She's more patriotic than anybody I know, and she deserves to be a citizen. For dreamers who are here through no fault of their own, especially somebody like her who's the most law-abiding person I know. She deserves to become a citizen. She deserves to be able to vote. But we need to pass the Clean Dream Act. It's time. It's actually so past due. And I'm so sick of watching politicians use dreamers as their own little political pawns when they're running for office and then kind of abandon them later. So that to me is priority one. I also had an opportunity to take a trip to the southern border last year. My brother is an interpreter for the federal court system. We visited shelters in El Paso. We went across the border into Mexico and talked to people. I'm fluent in English and Spanish. Well, fluent in English sometimes, but and we met there's one shelter there. It's about 600 men, women, and children. They are waiting, thinking that they are going to be able to get asylum in the United States, and we know that the president has completely cut that off. We also know that there are so many people that are still going through deportation hearings. I've sat through those hearings in Las Cruces, and at about $1 million price tag a day, we are just putting people through this revolving door of deportations. One of the women that was there, a 70-year-old woman who had come to the United States because she wanted to see her grandkids. This is a broken system. It is time to fix it, and we have, we just need comprehensive immigration reform, and this is what everybody wants, right? Most people believe that, they know somebody who's here from another country and believe that that's the best thing for our economy. That's the best thing just for our culture. And actually that is who we are as Americans. So it is time to fix this.
Exactly. And I think too, for college students like me, some of these things are actually like, I go to GW and there are dreamers and DACA recipients in our classes. They've done the same amount of work, gotten this, same or better grades as us. And the idea that like, we're going to let one factor decide that they can't be with us, to me, is just like, again, doesn't make sense, I don't think, to many other people. And that for the rest of the questions, until we move on to the audience Q&A, I'm going to bring in our political director, Alex, who's going to ask a couple other questions as well. Hi, Alex.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Cara. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
So my first question regards education reform. So what do you think the top priorities are for education reform in the K through 12 education system?
Ooh, that's an easy one. We got to get rid of Betsy DeVos. Here's somebody who does not believe in public education, who probably wants to privatize the entire system. And in a place like Nebraska, the solution is not charter schools. I understand that charter schools do well in some areas. We don't need them here. We have an excellent public education system. It's just always under attack from Republicans who want to defund it. And it's leading to poor outcomes, especially for people of color, especially for low-income families. And so that to me is number one priority. And again, why we just actually have to vote Donald Trump out of office.
Absolutely. To me, it makes no sense why anyone would ever want to gut public education, because everything stems from that. Once you educate our youth, they end up better. It helps our economy. It helps our society.
Yeah.
Moving on. Sorry.
So also, I'm so proud to have the endorsement of the Nebraska State Education Association and stand by those teachers right now who are true warriors when a lot of them are either, back in school teaching or even teaching on, at home remotely, and they miss their kids and they miss their students, and nobody wants kids to be home. We all want them to go safely back to school. But again, this just shows like how unbelievable this is in our country right now. It's just hard. It's so, I worry that we're getting numb. I do. I worry that we are a little bit numb to the atrocities that Donald Trump is committing every single day.
Yeah. So moving on, how will you work to make sure people with histories of domestic abuse, police violence, and other malignant behaviors won't be able to obtain a firearm?
Yeah, so this gets into this idea of common sense gun safety, right? And these things are fairly popular. It's so interesting to me when young people like the Parkland students or the people from the March for Our Lives have been more bold on these issues than adults, than full-grown adult politicians. And so look, I support the Second Amendment. I understand the importance that being able to own a gun is, I understand our history and where that comes from. I also have a sister who lives on a ranch, and she'd be pretty upset with me if I tried to take away her shotgun when the coyotes come to try to eat her horses. So, we have fences around articles within the Constitution. You can't own a tank. There should be violent criminal history checks. I mean, that's 90% of Americans support this, and yet my opponent and Donald Trump do not. we need to enact common sense gun safety, because nobody should be afraid to go to school for fear that you might be gunned down in a classroom. And I mean, I think one of the interesting things we saw with the pandemic when it hit was that the number of school shootings went down so significantly. But that's so terrifying at the same time, that knowing that our kids are back in school means that they're going to be victimized by gun violence. That's not okay. And I again, very proud to have endorsements from groups like Moms Demand Action, the Giffords PAC, groups around the country that are working on this issue and see it as the public health crisis that it is. And it's just time for us to stop stop allowing politicians to bow down to the gun lobby, to the NRA, and start actually working on this to create a healthy and safe America.
Keeping kids home for remote learning should not be the only way to keep them safe at school. So for my next question, yeah, thank you. For the next question, you already touched on this a little bit when you talked about climate change, but how will you help farmers and other agricultural industry workers in Nebraska, where farming is a large part of the economy and society?
Yeah, it's a huge part. And just for clarity, my district is 98% urban suburban. So while our district is not a rural area, we are highly impacted, like you said, by the rural economy and our agricultural economy. 1 in 4 jobs in the state of Nebraska are related to our agricultural economy. And so this is critical. And I've talked to a number of farmers around the state, and what they tell me their mantra is make farming fun again. 90% of farms in Nebraska are family owned and operated. This is their chosen line of work, often a legacy of part of their family history, and we need to protect them. And they don't want government handouts. They want to be able to do their work, to do it effectively and efficiently. And they don't want to be victimized by tariffs. They don't want to be victimized by flooding. They want the resources to be successful. And so I would like to work on this. I'd like to serve on the agricultural committee in Congress, because I think that our Nebraska delegation has really let our farming community down. And despite the fact that I don't live in a rural district, I think I would be a better voice than they are.
Which is truly
and I'm endorsed by the Nebraska Farmers Union.
Yeah, that's just truly a testament to how terrible the Republicans, the Nebraska Republicans are. So my next question is simple. What do you think is currently the biggest threat to our democracy?
Well, the easy answer is Donald Trump, but I think really it's corruption in politics, and that starts with politicians who are bought and sold by corporations, politicians who prioritize corporate interests over regular working and now non-working people. I think that we need to change the system, and that's why I have rejected corporate PAC money. And actually, a lot of people will say things like, oh yeah, it's easy for a politician to do that when they're running because you won't get it. Well, that hasn't been the case with me. I've been offered corporate PAC money and have said, no, like I'm not going to lie to the voters in the 2nd district. Like I actually stand by this issue. We need to change the way that districts are gerrymandered. Our own district has been victimized by gerrymandering. We need to have third-party independent bodies involved in redistricting process. We need to fight voter suppression, interference in voting by foreign entities, and now misinformation being put out by the President of the United States. I'm sure you all are smart enough to know you can't vote twice. So these are all kind of coupled on one of, like, to me, it's all corruption, and it needs to end. It's created voter apathy. It's created division, and it creates a system where, it's unfortunate where we're being pitted against each other. I'm looking at some of the questions in the chats about, when am I rioting again? I mean, come on, like I'm not rioting. I took part in a peaceful protest with my friends because we don't want to see our friends victimized by anyone. We don't want our communities to be unsafe. I've been building a safe, healthy community in Omaha for my entire career working here. And it's just a shame that we have so much division when really we actually agree on so many things. In Nebraska is a perfect example of that. In Nebraska, we want to take care of our neighbors. We want to take care of our land. We want to make sure that our kids can be in school and be in school safely. We want them to have good education, good education. I do believe that it's really, unfortunate that the parties and the mainstream media divide us so much sometimes when really we agree on a lot of things. And even when we don't, we can have dialogue about it. It's time to be able to just have normal conversations about things when we don't agree, instead of just continuing this divisiveness. I mean, our kids are watching.
Absolutely. Those reforms you mentioned are all so critical. So for the final staff question, why is it so important that we win Nebraska's 2nd district? And what are you looking forward to most once you're elected?
Well, as I mentioned, this district is important. Well, it's for a number of reasons. I do believe, as a woman in the United States, we clearly don't have enough representation in Congress. So I'd be honored and proud to be the first woman elected. I am running as an independent agent. I wasn't recruited by anybody to run. And so I believe that the voters in the 2nd district and in every district deserve an independent voice, somebody who's going to put them over a party. Whereas my opponent has been voting 94% of the time with his party, kind of just does what he's told. I have already, bucked leadership within the Democratic Party at times. And it's critical because of that electoral college vote. We have a real chance here to give that to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And there are a number of pundits and prognosticators saying it could come down to this electoral college vote. And so, it's a good place for people to invest their time, energy, and I still have that fire in the belly to finish this through. So I'm just excited to be doing it again. I miss being able to knock on doors. I miss being able to talk to people in person, but I've gotten to know so many incredible people for our district, and I've never felt more proud to be a Nebraskan by choice.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you so much, Cara.
Thanks, Alex. All right, so before we start the audience questions, and we have 1 or 2 more audience question spots left, so if anyone watching has an audience question, please feel free to submit it in the comments, and my team will add it to the lineup. And while we wait on that, I'm going to talk a little bit, one about our organization, also how anyone watching can help out Cara and help flip the 2nd District blue. Friends of Intelligent Democracy is the first hybrid political action committee run by college students. I started our organization back in 2017 after almost getting kicked out of a Democratic Party fundraiser because the organizers didn't believe that young people should participate in that part of politics. At the time there, right, I was not there to write a bunch of $5,000 checks as a senior in high school. So our core value is expanding access to the campaign space for young people, and why we're supporting amazing candidates like Cara who are willing to get on here and talk to us about the issues not only affecting young people, but affecting every American today. And I'm going to welcome Giselle onto the call so she can talk a little bit about how you can get involved with the Eastman campaign, and there'll be some links in the comment section where you can take direct action.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again so much for allowing me to jump in here to talk about how you can get involved on our campaign. So as Cara has talked about, this is a grassroots campaign, and so we need all of the help we can get. And luckily, we have a great virtual action center, which is mobilize.us/Eastman for Congress. And there are many ways you can get involved. The biggest way, besides donating, that you could help Cara get elected right now is helping us with direct voter contact. So if you could be willing to make phone calls for us, do texting for us, we have a toolkit that we give everyone to make sure that you're all trained up and ready to go. We do one-on-one trainings to make sure that you have all the info that you need to talk to voters in the district about Cara's campaign, how important it is to get Cara elected and get her in Congress. So the good news is you can help us out from anywhere across the country. We have people joining us from in district and out of district to make sure Cara gets to Congress. So again, please join us for texting or phone banking, and you can see all those links in the comments. And we hope to see you all soon. This is such an important race, and so we would just love all of the help we can get to make sure Cara gets there. So thank you all so much.
Great. Thanks so much, Giselle. Before we move in, now we're going to move into audience questions, and we just got a bunch in the chat. My colleague Sarah will come on after this first video question, but we are lucky to have a video question actually from another college student, and we are really excited to have him on. So I will play the video real quick. Let me press the right button here.
Hi, Cara. My name is Nick Kohler, and I'm a junior at the George Washington University. My question for you is, as student loan rates continue to skyrocket, only to be impacted more by the COVID-19 pandemic, how do you plan on helping students and alumni like myself deal with the burden of student loans?
All right. Hi, Cara.
Hi.
So we just received Nick's question. That was our first audience question. If you would like to respond.
I'm happy to respond to that kid. He's a good friend of our family's and has actually worked on the campaign. He knows the answer to this question. But look, student debt in our country now is at over 1.5 trillion. And I don't think the federal government should profit off of this. And so I served on the board of a community college here. It's one of the top 10 in the country. And I talked to so many students who, even for a community college, which is by far the most effective, efficient, cheapest game in town when you look at cost benefit, and incredible high quality education, there are still people who were hesitant to go to Metro or left Metro in debt. And that inhibits our young people from being able to compete in a global economy, from buying things like homes and cars and that's not important to everybody, but to a lot of people it is. To a lot of people who want to start a family out of college or sometime near that time. And it's just time for us to change this. The University of Nebraska actually did something this year that was amazing, which is they said they were going to, waive tuition for people earning under, I think it was $60,000 a year. And so we can follow in their footsteps. I personally don't believe that anything should be completely free. I've always run my nonprofits where you had to have like a little bit of skin in the game. But I do think that we need debt-free tuition, especially at community colleges, two-year colleges. This is how we get people into good paying jobs. This is how we make sure that our young people are educated and they need to be highly educated. It's not just okay to say, education. I believe in high quality education. That's why I loved, serving the community college, because that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. This is definitely a big issue for a lot of students right now and alumni. Great. So our next question is from Anna Jett. She is a GW student, and her question is, with the recent Atlantic article about President Trump's remarks towards fallen veterans, referring to them as things such as losers and suckers, how would you work to support and protect veterans?
That one was like a gut punch that I don't understand. And it's been verified by Fox News. So I'm going to say I believe it. And so imagine the bravado and hubris that it would take to say something so disgusting. My grandfather served in World War II. My uncles are Vietnam vets. To disparage veterans at all is despicable. But what he said just, crossed the line. And again, this is where I worry. I worry that we're becoming numb because I'm hearing people brush it off as not super significant. I think it might be the most disgusting thing that he's done and said. And when I look at my opponent, who I am in awe of his military service. I mean, he's a retired brigadier, one-star general. I am concerned that his that military courage did not translate into political courage. And he has not stood up and denounced Trump for these horrible things that he said. And, we have this laundry list of ways that he's denigrated veterans, from John McCain to Vindman. I mean, just saying terrible things about people who have served our country in a way that I have never done, and would never do that. So I'm really proud. We have a group called Veterans for Cara that's actively helping to spread the word about the campaign. And I believe that, there are things in our country that are so wrong. I mean, obviously, Donald Trump's comments is one thing, but even the idea that we have homeless veterans, those two words should never be in the same sentence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a lot more that we could be doing for veterans that right now under our current administration definitely are not happening. Great. Okay. So
even at the VA, right? Like, so the VA we always hear about the bad sides of the VA, but the VA is a pretty robust, thriving system. But there are 47,000 positions that are unfilled right now at the VA, and that leads to longer waiting times and things. So that's where some of the negativity comes. But what we need to start doing is filling those positions and, encouraging young people to be able to go to school, not drowning in debt when they leave, but making sure that those positions are filled for our veterans.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, so our next question is from a viewer named Sue, and she wants to know more about your visit to the border last year that you mentioned earlier in the live stream, and they're interested in the conditions that you saw there.
Yeah, so when we went, that was right at the time where the Trump administration was not allowing people to go, especially elected officials. And I'm not a currently elected official. That'll change soon. But where people weren't allowed to go visit the detention centers. We did see some remnants of them, but we had scheduled a meeting with Veronica Escobar, the representative from El Paso, to ask her more. And unfortunately, that day she got called to actually go deal with some of the stuff that she was fighting against. And so, but what we heard was just so many stories, and this was from the organizations that are working to try to solve some of the problems on the border, people who are working at the shelters, people staying at the shelters, and even from Border Patrol, from some of the people who work at the courthouse in Las Cruces, some of the attorneys, some of the judges, and it was just sort of this uniform thing of, this is a broken system. It was before Donald Trump, but he has exacerbated it to such a degree that it's hard to recognize this as the United States of America. And so it was heartbreaking. I mean, I walked away thinking, we have solutions. They're not, some of the solutions aren't that exciting to, for people when we talk about increased, ports of entry, things like that. They're not the things that politicians want to run on, but they're these fixes that we can create. And it's insane that members of Congress spend so much time working with lobbyists and trying to get more corporate money and acting on behalf of them, instead of actually just rolling up their sleeves and getting to work. And it's despicable, because what you're doing is electing somebody like me to run the government. What you should hope is that I'm not going to tell you all this flashy stuff, but that I'm actually going to roll up my sleeves and get to work. And that's what I've done in my career. I've solved problems. I've worked with Republicans and Democrats to solve problems in our community, and that's what I want to do in Congress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point. And hopefully that will get to happen soon. Great. So our next audience question is from a viewer named Colin, who wants to know your thoughts about a new green American power grid.
So, I mean, this, we talked about this a little bit before of like the way that we need to invest in renewable energy, in the way that we need to move away from our dependence on fossil fuels. And that might not be something where it would directly impact, that Nebraska might be able to participate in, but I am excited to get to Congress to to work with experts around the country who are passionate about ways that we can address climate change all over the country. And for me, where I'm looking for the voice is like to do what's best for Nebraska. And one of the ways that I have felt like I can be helpful is with an opposition to the Keystone Pipeline. I testified against the pipeline in 2017. And because I've talked to so many people who say that they're worried about their land, they're worried about eminent domain, I know the direct impact that environmental disaster can have on a community by working on the Superfund site in Omaha. We're the largest residential Superfund site for lead contamination. And I also went to Flint after the Flint water crisis and talked to public health experts there. So I believe that my voice can be best served by advocating for Nebraska, but as somebody who is fully in favor of making sure we move the country forward when it comes to the creation of a green economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, renewable energy is definitely an important issue right now, especially we could see across the country the effects of climate change, and renewable energy is definitely hopefully a solution to some extent. Okay, great. So our next viewer question, the viewer wants to know about how you will increase affordable housing while you're in Congress.
Well, so usually that kind of stuff is done at the local level, and that's something that I worked on here in Omaha, was the creation of green, healthy, affordable housing. I served on the Mayor's Fair Housing Board, so I understand this issue. I think that putting Ben Carson in charge of HUD was one of the worst decisions that the president made, and we need to. This is something where. I've talked to a number of developers around the country who are interested in this. Obviously, there are ways that we can use tax credits for this. The opportunity zone that actually was embedded in the Trump tax cuts was supposed to help for this. Unfortunately, the results have been more that the impact or the benefit has gone to wealthy developers instead of the people it was supposed to serve. But I think with just a few changes in members of Congress, with a few changes in the way that we do this kind of stuff locally, and maybe some changes in leadership in general, we could actually start moving the country forward with developing public-private partnerships, with making sure that we're investing in mixed-use housing, and that we're promoting this as a sustainable way of developing communities. We do this really well here in Omaha. Actually, we have something called our purpose-built community that was, I think, that Warren Buffett was the brainchild of, where we have this kind of mixed use facility. It's low income housing mixed with middle income housing. There's a community center, there's healthcare, all of these things in one, and it's doing really well and thriving. And I think that could be a model for the country.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. Great, so moving on to our next audience question. A viewer asked, what are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests we've seen across the country?
So I think it's important to back up a little bit and talk about where this comes from. And there are, I had the fortune of actually hearing from the people who started the Black Lives Matter movement years ago at a conference, and was impressed by what they were trying to accomplish by saying, we have to acknowledge that there's systemic racism in parts of our country, and we have to actually move forward together to address it and to end it. And so when we look at some of the statistics around this, where for a Black man in the United States, the 5th leading cause of death is being hurt by a police officer. I mean, that is something we have to acknowledge. And at the same time, this movement is gaining traction where people are saying, we're not going to stand for racism anymore. And also that there have been a number of peaceful protests around the country bringing people together for this movement. None of us wants to see violence in our community, violence of any sort. None of us likes that. None of us should be standing for it. And so I believe that what's happening is we're seeing the country come together around this issue, and actually working towards solutions. I see Republicans in Omaha who have Black Lives Matter posters on their door. I think that's amazing. That's an amazing cultural shift. There's a lot of work to do. And I'm very proud because today we actually rolled out a slate of endorsements that I have from 48 Black leaders in Omaha, and who are working with me to develop a racial justice plan. And these are all with the community, with input from police officers, public health workers, nurses, faith-based leaders. This is where we all come together as a community and say, none of us wants violence in our community. We all want to live in safe and healthy communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is definitely also another really important issue. So moving on to our next audience question. What do you think needs to be in the next COVID relief bill?
So I'm actually pretty proud of the fact that we had an event recently. Congressman Earl Blumenauer from Oregon reached out to me and said that he had sponsored the Restaurants Act, which would be for local independent restaurants. It's projected that about 85% of them are going to go under. And this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I spend a lot of time in local cafes. I did before the pandemic, but and so he wasn't able to get anybody from Nebraska, or nobody from Nebraska was willing to sign on to the bill. We held an event, a Zoom event. It was a press event with some local restaurant owners. And that night, my opponent, Congressman Bacon, signed on to the Restaurant Act. So I'm really proud that we've been able to push him to make the right decisions. It's unfortunate that when he voted for the CARES Act, he didn't fight to make sure that Nebraska, or to Omaha, the largest city in his district, got as much money as Atlanta did, despite the fact that we have a slight difference in population. He should have fought harder for this district. And I believe what we need to do is really start working to make sure that people living in poverty, people who've lost their jobs, people who have to stay home now to make sure their kids get educated, small local independent restaurants and businesses are taken care of first. Of course, there's always a role to help out corporations. We do that well in the United States. But I think really focusing on local communities, local individuals who've been hit so hard by this, and making sure that they have the relief that they need so that they don't eventually become evicted. And this is from all sides, right? Like, landlords need the help too. We need to make sure that some of the medium-sized businesses are okay, especially those that employ a number of people in our district. It's tough. And then on the other end of this, like, we just need things like universal testing, contact tracing, PPE for everybody to make sure that we have all this. And we need to be working, obviously, towards a vaccine in a way that makes sense, in accordance with public health experts, scientists, and to stop the spreading of misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely upsetting to see the effects that this has had on my community and small businesses and some people that I know. And I know that that's the situation for a lot of people around the country. So definitely a lot of work to be done to ensure that small businesses and other people are not struggling during these times. Okay, great. So our last audience question is, what do you think needs to be done to repair the reputation of the United States and other countries after it has been tarnished by Donald Trump and other Republicans?
Yeah, this is a pretty serious issue. The sitting president of the United States has done significant damage to our relationships with our allies. And that's a hard one to understand, especially when he seems to prioritize relationships with dictators, enemies of the United States, traditional enemies, and over making sure that we're moving together, and especially in the middle of this pandemic. So there are a number of deals that the president got us out of. Some of those deals weren't perfect, but blowing up the system isn't always the best option, but rather working together to resolve issues. One of the things that concerns me the most is the lack of funding at the State Department, and the fact that he has still not filled significant cabinet positions, which fundamentally threatens our ability to engage in diplomacy around the world. And this is something that should concern everybody. along with the multitude of things that we're hearing from him and we know about his administration. But that's something that to me should be incredibly concerning to everybody.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. So that was our last audience question. Thank you so much for answering.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. All right, well, we've come to the end of our event, so I just want to reemphasize to everyone watching, we've sent links in the comments on how you can support Kara's campaign financially and how you can get involved on the volunteer level. And just one last time, I want to turn it over to you, Kara, if you have any closing words for everyone. Oh, I think we might have lost her. Oh, yep, okay, all right. A little bit of technical issues, that's okay. All right, so I want to say thank you everyone for watching tonight, and you can follow Kara on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as Friends of Intelligent Democracy. Again, you can donate in the comments. We're going to send the link one last time before, oh, one second. Here she is. Okay, let me bring her back on screen if we can. She's in the waiting room. There we go. I think we've got her. There we go, okay. All right, Kara, you're back. All right, any closing remarks for the audience today?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. I'm just grateful to be here. I really appreciate everyone who is watching and for asking questions and even for writing snarky comments. The great thing about our country is that we still have freedom of speech, and I'm always happy to take questions, even the tough ones, because I think you deserve somebody who's actually going to represent you. I think one of the things that we tend to forget is that I'm being essentially hired to represent you, not the other way. So I'm grateful for the time. If you're able to get involved with the campaign, we'd love to have you. And most important, please just stay healthy and safe right now.
All right. Great. Thank you so much, Kara. As she said, please everyone stay healthy and have a nice evening. And thank you so much for